now? I think no. Thank you, Dr. Matesa. Thank
You are
you very much.
welcome. You are welcome.
Our third presenter, his name is Stefan Okeneruru Wadah from University of Ilorin, Nigeria, and theme is theater, feminism, and African she-male. Dr. Stefan, I think he is absent. And the fourth presenter is Said Ousso from University of Moulay Ismail from Morocco. The title's name measuring EFL teachers' readiness of promoting learner autonomy. Are we really moving to andragogy? Dr. Said.
Yes.
Now you can start.
Yes.
Yeah, please.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you see my screen?
Yes,
Yes.
doctor.
Thank you very much. So, good morning all, good afternoon all, good everyone. So, as you can see, my title is Measuring EFL Learners, Teachers' Readiness to Promoting Learner Autonomy. Are we really moving to andragogy? As you can see that education has gone through a number of stages and the changes from pedagogy, pedagogy to andragogy. So as the title suggests, I will be talking about the readiness of English as a foreign language teachers to promote learner autonomy in the Moroccan context. So as an introduction, this is a contemporary demanding era. Citizens are thus required to be equipped with necessary skills to cope with the various requirements of the learning journey. So learners are now obliged to lead the digital era in which they have to be autonomous, independent, self-assisting themselves. So this calls for new approaches to language and learning that will encourage a lifelong learner. In fact, it is stated in the existing literature, Benson and others, that learners always have a desire in shaping their learning process. Defining the concept, the universally accepted definition is provided by Olick, 1981, who defines the concept as the ability to take charge of one's own learning. And according to these researchers, namely Pichakov et al., the Olick's definition encompasses assuming responsibility for determining objectives, content, learning strategies, evaluation of one's own learning, meaning learners' learning. For the Moroccan secondary school's curriculum defines the term as the freedom and ability to manage one's own affairs, which implies the right to make decisions about what, why, and how to learn. Um, uh, Various models have been proposed by different researchers, each in his own base of research and foundation. So, for example, Benson's, Macar's, Noonan, Oxford, all of these researchers have proposed, different models throughout the literature related to autonomy. So, and among these models, the curriculum in the Moroccan context for English as a foreign language, they decided to suggest not impose Noonan's model 5 levels of autonomy implementation. Okay, so such changes are reflected in the learning theories and teaching methods, which are reconsidered through the roles of the teacher from an owner to a facilitator of knowledge. So by the late 1960s, humanistic approaches have taken the lead. So they took learners' affect and affection into consideration. And so constructivism and communicative language teaching uh, consider the learner as a highly involved and active participant in the learning and teaching process. So concepts such as pedagogy, pedagogy, and cybergogy have become buzzwords and concepts in the literature related to autonomy. For example, pedagogy means encouraging self-regulation, self-direction. Pedagogy encourages collaboration, among learners and among learners and teachers. Cyberpedagogy encourages learner engagement in online environments. So some principles or core principles of Knowles' concept of andragogy are as follows. Uh, First of which is learners as self-directed. So learners need to be self-directed. That is to say, their self-concept changes from a state of dependence on others into a self-directed personality. For the learners as resources, adult learners have become sources of their own and on their own, since they have accumulated a number of experiences that would help them be sources for themselves and for other learners. Learning as a goal-oriented, learning that is goal-oriented is an example of a developmental task. Something with which you sign a goal, it becomes a developmental task. And you will develop that task, meaning you are learning. Okay, for example, when you see yourself as you were a child crawling, you cannot walk, and you want to walk, you consider walking as a developmental task. So it's your goal to walk, and then you walk. That's how it works with learning as a goal oriented. So learning as a problem solving activity. They believe that adult learners believe that education can help them have the capacity to solve problems they encounter in life as a whole. Okay, so pedagogy versus andragogy. When we talk about learner autonomy in pedagogy, it's more of teacher control, and so learner autonomy is more minus negative. And in andragogy, learner autonomy marked positive. That is to say, teacher control is of less importance here. And based on this literature, my article, or research article, has focused on the purpose, which is investigating the extent to which language teachers promote learner autonomy in their classes. The question is, to what extent do EFL teachers promote learner autonomy? The methodology adopted here is a cross-sectional survey, quantitative approach. A self-completion questionnaire was distributed to teachers, EFL teachers. Spaces course was used as a tool for the statistical management. So the target population, as we just said, is derived from secondary EFL teachers. So results, starting with demographic characteristics. So males are the dominant group here, and females with 40%. Okay. So for the teaching experience, those who have 1 to 2 years are the dominant group here, followed by those who have more than 7 years teaching. Okay. So here's the core part of the questionnaire. So the items are as follows. I help learners to identify their own strengths and weaknesses. It's 46 or 36% of the participants agreed and strongly agreed with the item, which is a positive thing. I help learners set up their own learning goals. 43 and 30 agreed and strongly agreed. I help learners to decide what to learn outside of the classroom. This is learning outside of the confines of the classroom. That's autonomy. And 39 and 26% agreed and strongly agreed again. So I help learners to evaluate their own learning in progress. So 65% to 18% agreed and strongly agreed with the item again. For the other items, I help learners to stimulate their own interest in learning English. Again, 54 to 33%, and with the rest of the items, 37, 49, 38, 52, 39. The results are inclusive all the way to the last item, which is a positive thing, which means that the present study indicated that EFL teachers are ready to provide learners with chances to be autonomous language learners. So reflecting on the results, strategies for promoting autonomy were employed to a great extent as depicted by the tables. Significant also is the fact that the rates regarding the statement items across the agreement, disagreement, and neutrality responses were all conclusive, meaning they all agreed with the items very strongly and agreed with positive agreement. So thank you very much, and these are some of the references for this present study. And thank you again very much for your attention.
Thank you, Dr. Said. Also, very interesting theme. Dear participant, dear listener, audience, if you have a question, now you can ask for Dr. Said, also from Morocco.
Yes, I have a question.
Yes, please, Dr. Mateso.
First of all, thank you for your good presentation. So my question is between pedagogy and andragogy, because in a temporary time, most of people like using the word pedagogy rather than andragogy. So according to your research, based also to your results, between pedagogy and andragogy, which is better than another based on the current situation in which we are living?
Well, pedagogy is mainly related to teaching children. As you can see, the definition given by Knowles for pedagogy is the art and science for teaching children, while andragogy is more suitable for adult learners. That is to say, giving much space, giving much choice, giving much autonomy to adult learners, because as little 1991 suggests everyone is autonomy is in everyone's nature. So andragogy is related to adult learners, while pedagogy is related to children mainly.
So which is better than another based to your result?
None is best than the other, because one suits for the other level. For example, pedagogy is better when we talk about teaching children, while andragogy is better when we talk about adult learners. So it's a question of what group of learners do you teach.
Okay. Thank you very much. I'm satisfied. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Mateso. Thank you, Dr. Said. Anybody have a question from Dr. Said? I think no. Thank you again, Dr. Said. And next, our presenters is Dr. Dimpavita Pal from Ghalsi Mahavidyalaya, West Bengal from India. The title's name, Encoding Civilization and Australian Aboriginal Concept of Sustainable Development, a study of selected poems of Kat Walker. Dr. Dimpavita, welcome to our conference. We are listening you. Thank you. You can start.
Thank you for introducing me. And as the host has already told that I am from India, and therefore a very good evening to everyone from India. And today I am going to talk about eco-conscious fields which was felt by the Australian Aboriginal people, and as it was reflected in one of the foremost poets of Australian Aborigines, whose name is Kath Walker. Now, Kath Walker, or as she took her, changed her name into Ujeru Nunukal, and her first volume of poetry was We Are Going, and this appeared in 1964. And this poem, this collection of poems is usually considered the first Australian Aboriginal poet in English. Now, she belongs to that group of Aboriginal poets who think that poetry should have an overt socio-political dimension. Ujeru's poetry has also been read by critics as political poetry, with special focus on her protest against racism and colonialism. And Ujeru herself also intended to see We Are Going as the voice of the indigenous people of her country. Now, Adam Sumika's comment in this context seems very significant. I quote, "Most important, Ujeru Nunukal introduced an Aboriginal perspective into the contemporary Australian literature for the first time. She celebrated Aboriginal survival in the face of adversity, lamented prejudice and oppression, and offered an optimistic view of the potential for interracial harmony in the country. Unquote. Now, a close study of Ujeru's poems reveals that this aboriginal perspective that Shoemaker has spoken of leads to a great extent towards Aboriginal people. Reason for the Aboriginal survival in the face of adversity was the sustainable development acquired by Ujeru's ancestors. A number of Ujeru's poems unfailingly betray her concern for the environment. A large number of her poems could be read from the perspective of the different traits of eco-criticism, such as eco-colonialism, eco-Marxism, animal studies, environmentalism, etc. Now, this paper chooses one of the most read poems of Ujeru Nunukal, whose title is "We Are Going," and very humbly attempts at reading this poem from the perspective, and while doing so, it also looks into the poet's concern for the sustenance of the biosphere. And the most important poem of this group is "We Are Going," as we have already said. The poem begins dramatically with a semi-naked band of tribal people arriving at a little town. These subdued and silent people are the only remaining swan of their tribe. I quote, "They came into the little town, a semi-naked band, subdued and silent, all that remained of their tribe." Now the poet leaves it upon the readers to anticipate what would have happened to these people earlier, that they had to go away from their old place. They came to the place because it happened to be their old burial ground sometime in the past. They are disheartened to see that their sacred burial ground is now used to dump rubbish. They're astonished to find that they have become strangers in their own land, and the real strangers of the country have become the owners of the country. The semi-naked people, however, deny to accept that they are strangers. They declare that they rather belong to the place. They are the representatives of the old ways, the corroboree, the bordering, the sacred ceremonies, and the laws of the elders. I quote, "We are the corroboree and the burial ground. We are the old sacred ceremonies, the laws of the elders. We are the wonder tales of dream time, the tribal legends told. We are the past, the hunts and the laughing games, the wandering campfires. We are the lightning bolt over Gafemba Hill, quick and terrible." Now, they are the nature and the past, all the old ways, which of course are gone now and scattered. The poem actually shows how these people are particularly lamenting for the old ways, a lost culture which was so much a part of the existence of these people. And in the last line, "And we are going," these people are talking about leaving the place, perhaps as a sign of protest against what has been done to the land. Now, broadly, the poem is about the disposition of both the human beings and the flora and fauna as a consequence of the colonial aggression. The poet here tells us about a tragic story of a group of indigenous people who have been forced to leave their own land. With the advent of the white civilization, accompanied by deforestation, the whole biosphere was destroyed. It caused a severe shortage of food for the indigenous people, and they had to leave the place for survival. Even after moving from their own place, they couldn't survive. Most of them died for several reasons, shortage of food being the primary one. "We Are Going" unquestionably shows the connection the Aborigines had with the land. It begins with a pronoun which denotes plurality, signifying the collective identity of these people. The poet emphasizes the collectiveness throughout the poem. In the third line of the poem, the poet uses the pronoun "that" instead of "those." It denotes the insignificance of those people, of the small group, in comparison to the many white men who are hurrying like ants. Now, the most notable thing in the poem is the recurring use of the phrase "we are." The pronoun "we" is here related to the everything associated with the aboriginality. The poet draws parallels between the practices and tradition and relates them to the Aborigines. And now the poem also depicts the disaster effect of the cultural baggage brought by the British colonizers in the name of civilization. With a hangover of the notion of progress in a white man's way, they promiscuously destroyed the natural atmosphere to replace it with the jungle of concrete. They couldn't and didn't realize the importance of the Bora ground to the environment. So they converted it into the ground for rubbish. The white men are seen here by the Aborigines as hurrying like ants. This metaphor has been used by the poet to denote the overwhelming number in which the intrusion of the colonizers took place. It may also refer to the meaninglessness of their hurry, and hence all their activities producing nothing much of real importance. This is an instance of dehumanization, placing the ants at the center of thought instead of humans, and hence reducing the importance of humans. So, an example of phenomenomorphism as forwarded by Steve Baker, or that of negative anthropomorphism of Kate Schopper. The poet here hints at the threat to environment caused by the increasing amount of chemical rubbish in a small town. Now, the most important symbol that has been used in the poem is that of the Bora ground itself. The Bora ground is at the center of the poem. The place the indigenous people returned to see was the old Bora ground, and they were very upset to find their sacred ground has been converted into a place for rubbish. The Bora ground is the site for the performance of the secret ceremony of the indigenous Australians called Bora. This is actually an initiation ceremony in which young Aborigines achieve the status of men. The ceremony involves the test for endurance to pain. After the initiation ceremony, the young people are allowed the access to the sacred songs, stories, dances, traditional lore, and to the sacred texts. The initiation means that from thence on, the young Aborigines are bestowed with a responsibility towards the tribe and also towards the environment, which every Aboriginal man perform according to traditional laws. Now, this responsibility to the environment is adhering to the concept of mastery of nature as contrasted to the concept of domination of nature. Mastery of nature has got the sense of responsibility, some kind of a respect for the laws of nature. The ceremony induces upon them the duty as a steward of nature, not the dominator. So the ceremony of Bora, and hence the site for the ceremony, the Bora ground, becomes the symbol for the concept of stewardship of nature. The fact that even after once going away from the sacred Bora ground, these Aboriginal people return to the place perhaps indicates towards their sense of the unfinished duty is yet to be done. On the other hand, the Bora ground doesn't have any special significance to the members of the white civilization. They never felt that sense of responsibility to nature to serve as the steward of it. Rather, they believe in the other idea of domination of nature and act likewise. So the sacred Bora ground has been easily, without any hesitation, been converted into the dumping ground by them. This conversion of the Bora ground into the dumping ground is also symbolic. The emblem of the initiation of performing the duty towards nature has been turned into the spot witnessing the devastating activities of civilization, an emblem of using nature for its own purpose. But the poet is hopeful. She shows that only the half of the ground is covered with rubbish, signifying that the other half is still left and the damage is not yet complete. So there is still the hope of reviving the Bora ground from being fully destroyed. Now, so this study brings some issues into the forefront. It is found that the poet often intertwines the sufferings of her fellow Aboriginal people with the sufferings of the non-human world at the hands of the colonizers. She emphasizes on the intimate connection that is strongly felt by the Aborigines with the natural world. She also hints at the loss of such connections which are ecocentric in the recent times as a consequence of the dreadful influence of the so-called civilized European people. But see, that doesn't necessarily mean that the poet is a careful and responsible handling of the natural resources, the mastery of nature, rather than the domination of nature that has been emphasized by the poet through the recurrent allusions to the customs like Bora. In this respect, she prefers a kind of sustainable development where the whole biosphere could prosper unanimously. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Dr. Dimpavita, for your beautiful presentation. Dear participants, if you have a question for Dr. Dimpavita, now you can ask. Okay, no questions. Thank you, Dr. Dimpavita, again. And the next presenters, I think Dr. Stefan now is us. Dr. Stefan Ogenoro Okbank from University of Ilorin, Nigeria. Title's name Theater, Feminism and the African Female. Dr. Stefan.
Thank you very much. I am Stephen Ogenoro Bada from the University of Ilorin, Nigeria, and my paper this afternoon is titled Theater, Feminism, and the African Female. Now, first of all, we look at what the female is, what theater is, and what feminism is. Some female intellectuals and writers, especially of African descent, out of prejudice for the male gender, self-aggrandizement, and in the toga of Western orientation, seek to redefine the place of the male and female genders on the African continent. These early scholars in literature, playwrights, and socio-political activists, such as Zulu Sofula, Eva Sutherland, were mild in their formulations and definitions of the role of women in the African society. Wangari Maathai in Kenya, Nigerian scholars such as Chimamanda Adichie, Stella Oyedepo, Julie Oko, and Irene Salami Agunwe have been more radical in their approaches. Those in the second categories do not only explore the subject of gender discourse in the context of gender equality, they also tend to displace the male gender, bring in the female gender into the center of discourse, and thereby importing Western principles and ideologies in the interrogation of the gender process. The rhetoric and a sermon of these scholars are not only masculine biased, they also exaggerate the capacity of women in nation and societal building. It is against this backdrop that I refer to the second category of feminist activists as female, a rigorous attempt at displacing the man. This paper is a to this trend in feminist advocacy in Africa. I explore female discourse in the African theater. While the research adopts literary and analytical methodological approaches, this research actually reveals that feminist advocacy in Africa is a rebirth of Western colonial process. Hence, females of African descent should deglamorize and deglorify radicals feminist advocacy in Africa. Before the advent of Western colonialism, Africa was devoid of the feminist experience. However, the tide changed with the encroachment of colonialism and the advent of globalization, transnationalism, and transculturalism. Influenced by Western thinking, women such as Wangari Maathai, Ama Ato Aido, Buchi Emecheta, and Catherine Acholonu decided to speak against this patriarchal system. Most recently, Irene Salami Agunloye, Stella Oyedepo, Julie Oko, and Chimamanda Adichie have energized the fight for gender equality. The most recent feminists amongst Alice Walker, Mary Kolawole, Molara, Alessia Ogundikbe, among others, actually have been able to appropriate different shades of feminism, which includes Tiwanism, femalism, womanism, black feminism, motherism, among other shades and movements. In fact, there have been a lithicization of African culture. But we must realize that any attempt at lithicizing African culture, literature, theater, and popular culture is an attempt to destroy African ethno-cultural values. Almost modernity was why the vocal of the numerous shade of African feminist engagement in her groundbreaking research titled Motherism, an Afrocentric alternative to feminism. Acholonu defines motherism as a multi-dimensional theory which involves the dynamic of ordering, rendering, creating structures, building and rebuilding in cooperation with mother nature. Now we look at female discourse in the African. The African literary space is saddled with numerous female discourses. Such discourses are inclusive of men who have also joined the call for equal gender society. Such male playwrights such as J.P. Clark in Wives Revolt, Femi Osofison, Ahmed Yerima, Bayo Adebowale, and others are in this category. Their works are a deviation from the chauvinist construct of the early African literature. Early African literatures were actually phallocentric. This tradition is brought to the fore in Chinua Achebe's Things Fall Apart. In Achebe's Magnus Opus, he creates a world where the world of the woman revolves around the man. Okonkwo, who is the major character, is the dominant character who compels his wives to execute whatever instruction he gives to them. While the campaign against patriarchy in Africa continue to surge on, the women folk have also been instrumental to the advocacy and advancement of patriarchy. The Ghanaian female playwright such as Efwa Sutherland, these are and Ansewa as a sales commodity. He uses her as a commodity for money making. In most cases, there is also the case of bride price, the payment of bride price that have actually been there in the African cultural space. In most cases, payment of bride price by the groom subjects the bride to the authority of her husband. There's no contending the fact that bride price remains the man's dominance in marriage. Nambozo affirms that with the bride price, the woman lives with the dominance of her husband. In most cases, he will own her as a property. Actually, the bride price payments in Africa have been a subject of discourse in the African literary space, as some playwrights have actually kicked against this practice. However, the bride price actually reflects the manliness of the groom. It reflects his ability to pay it, and that is his ability to pay it, family of the bride. In fact, in Africa, the bride price plays a major role in social standing. Many people who have no means of raising the bride price demanded remain bachelors. The duty of the woman in indigenous African society have included the production of foodstuff from the garden, collecting firewood and general food preparation, tending to household chores such as sweeping the house and washing the clothes. Suffice to state here that while the education of the girl child is paramount, feminists should not erase the role of the woman highlighted by both, since they are not injurious in any way to the female gender. Perhaps Adishe has forgotten. Adishe, who is actually an African Chime, who is in the category of radical feminists, has forgotten the stabilization and durability of marriage with the medium of the bride price. What I'm actually trying to contend here is that Aisha is actually anti-bride price. She actually contends that the bride price tradition should be abolished. Some problems in marriages that would have, however, we should understand that some problems in marriages that would have ordinarily led to separation of spouses can be resolved by the bride's family to ensure the stability of the union, since they all need to refund the bride price if the relationship fails. Now, the study reveals that feminist advocacy in Africa stems from the importation of Western colonial processes. However, while feminism has succeeded in dislocating and eroding certain barbaric practices such as child marriage, it has also gone too far in advocating the prohibition of bride price and the woman's submission to her husband. Unlike other post-colonial theories, feminism has been decentralized. This decentralization has culminated into the appropriation of various shades of an ideology and as well as counter ideologies of feminism pitted against each other. Feminism per se is a house that is divided. Counterculture has also expanded the scope and frontiers of feminism. It is no news that an African woman had won the highest accolade in the literary space, in the literary enterprise. Nadine Gordimer, the South African novelist. Despite her achievements, she does not tag herself a feminist. In fact, she contends that every Black woman, every African woman has more in common with a Black man than she has with her white sisters. Then why should feminism be imported into Africa? In other words, the women folk in Africa should be concerned with synergizing with the male folk to refute constructs that are not African culture driven. She-males of African descent should deglamorize and deglorify radical feminist advocacy in Africa. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Stefan. Thank you for your presentation. Anybody have a question for Dr. Stefan from Nigeria? University of Ilorin.
Yes.
Yes, Dr. Matesa.
Yes,
Please.
of course. So first of all, I would like to thank Dr. Stefan for his presentation. Of course, it's a good presentation about feminism. Yes. So I would like to ask, as you have mentioned about the book of Chinua Achebe, Things Fall Apart, when you talked about the revocation between patriarcha and matriarcha. So that it was focused on during the colonial period, when Okonkwo tried to defend the African values during that period to show also the role of women. Yes.
Exactly.
So my question is, now we are in the 21st century, and we see that the world is changing. So can we say that feminism is a successful stage in Africa?
To a very large extent, like I said in the presentation, transnationalism, globalization, and are brought in, have actually eroded a whole lot of our African cultures and African values. But when you look at it critically, a critical analysis of this feminist thing in Africa, this feminist ideology, we realize that Africa, despite the importation of feminism, the importation of the feminist ideology by various scholars, we also uphold to a very large extent um, this culture, the ideology of patriarchy. Patriarchy still holds sway in Africa. Therefore, actually, my contention in the presentation is that our feminism, actually, feminist practice in Africa shouldn't align fully and totally with what holds sway in the West. Because by the time we start importing all of what holds sway in the West, it begins to actually create spaces for problems within the marital setting, the social setting, the cultural setting, and a whole lot of others. Please, have I actually answered the question, sir? Hello?
Yeah, hello, yes. Good, thank you,
Yes, can
for
you
your
hear me?
answer, yes.
Thank you very much, sir.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Dr. Mateso, for your question. Thank you, Dr. Stefan, for your answer. I think, okay, and the next presenter, I think it's the last presenter in our online in our list. It's Roxana Maria from West University of Timisoara, Romania. Friedrich, chromatic similarities between romantic poetry and picture. Welcome to our conference, Dr. Roxana.
Very much for the invitation.
You can start now, thank you.
So, I will start my presentation. Can you see?
Yeah, now you can see, of course.
Considered the most important poet in Romanian literature and the less romantic, Mihai Eminescu captured the essence of romanticism and intertwined it with the Romanian tradition, offering us a pure, revolutionary, and European poetry. Caspar David Friedrich was a painter of German origin, being considered the most important representative of German Romanticism. The predominant themes in their creation are nature, the sea, the cloudy sky, the sunrise, the sunset, and the Gothic winds. In the artistic language, the color manifests itself to the transfer of information at the level of symbols, and the artistic image carries an emotional load that can be observed only by a human sensibility. Color is the representation of ideas and feelings. The importance of colors in painting is provided by the interaction between the units of the chromatic ensemble. In poetry, the interaction is realized at the semantic level by joint nouns from different fields, which enhance the metaphorical level of color. We consider interesting the analogy between Eminescu lyrics and romantic painting because both use the same thematic as sources of inspiration. Although they did not know each other or influence each other. So we choose some representative paintings for Friedrich because we consider that they fit the best with Eminescu's poetry due to the approximation of themes and thematics. We find in Eminescu some characteristics of the romantic painting, the discoloration of the contours, the play of light and shadows, and the surprise especially through some movable elements of the face. Friedrich the Monk on the Sea is it's a painting that captured the image of a rude sea, which through its presence absorbs the serenity of the sky and creates an oppressive atmosphere which foretells a change. The chromatics is interesting, the light tones seems absorbed by a dark tone, the clear light blue sky becomes gray, the water has a dark color, and the sand is green. Through the play of colors, the transition from clear to dark is made from silence to agitation. In the plan appears the acid sea. On the shore, there is a character who seems to contemplate the landscape. We notice how the sky takes on the color of the sea from the bottom up near the water. The sky becomes dark, rising in the gradients to lighter tones, gray, white, sky blue, blue. This landscape seems to be cut from Eminescu lyrics, which is found in various parts, when the sea, who is from the drama Star of the Sea, and Memento Mori, panorama of vanities. In the poem When the Sea, we meet the image of a rude sea of madness. When the sea is raging and is puffed by the waves, shakes its rings of bubble by the wind. When the clouds drag off the day from the weeping world, in the great bottom of the mid-sea. As in painting, in poetry, the sea appears static and the clouds flood the landscape. The verb raging and the adjective map by which the sea is personalized in chromatic plan is highlighted by the dark with black tone to express the state of anger of agitation. In Who Is, from the drama The Star of the Sea, we observe the personification of the clouds and the sea. Through personification such as the cloud screams and the sea bark, the oppressive atmosphere is highlighted. The cloud screams and the sea bark flash and cleave to eternity. In the picture, the scream of the clouds is expressed by the rotation of the colors. The sky seems to shadow the serene thought. The barking of the sea in the picture is suggested by the dark color and the presence of waves eager to destroy everything in their path. In an illustration, we notice that the landscape is associated with a sublime feeling and with the desire to escape from the everyday world. The play of colors of the sky can also be identified in the passage from Memento Mori, Panorama of Vanities. Clouds rose as a basalt desire and the blue sky as they heard from Black Sea and Danube Revolution. The comparison draws as basalt suggests the dark color of the clouds in association with the harshness and basalt, the clouds are load of significance which contributes to the creation of an opposite atmosphere. Chromatically given by dark tones. Friedrich uses the color of basalt to shade the clouds, while Eminescu uses the rock to give color to the lyrics. The Black Sea, in Eminescu's context, becomes black in a denotative sense in the pictorial plane, black losing its character of proper noun. We find in the landscape painting Evening belonging to Friedrich the image of the Eminescu's forest, which is flowing in the wind. The picture shows a sunset caught by a forest which can be boldly seen among of branches of the trees. The chromatic is in dark tones, green, blue, brown. Green suggests nature, infinitive blue night, and brown has a denotative meaning. used to render the natural color of the trunk of trees and growth. The trees are in the foreground, they are longer in size than the open elements in the painting, thus becoming the main object on the board. We notice how this slow in the rhythm of the wind. In the distance there is a sunset, as if absorbed by the forest. At the foot of the trees there are some bushes, and the center of the picture we identify two people. We identify in fourth epistle from UNESCO a passage similar to Freddy's painting. While the moon beyond the forest quivers, reddens, waxes night, and depicts the craggy summit of the treetop on the skies. All the while the walks, gigantic sentries around her stem, watch her rise with strict observance as she wore a princess beam. Although the moon is missing from 3D painting, we can deduce that after sunset the moon rises. Tree becomes the protectors of the moon. In this passage, we encounter an alternation of different Lexan forests, trees, and walks to avoid repetition and to create an image of variety of trees. The comparison of walks with some giants is done to highlight the size of the trees in relation to other elements and to create the impression that the trees are good guardians of the secrets of the nature. We can find the same image in poets along the road, the Poplar's Ode. Along the road, the Poplar's Ode I often use to pass, where Eminescu describes the multitude of trees in the poem Forest, why do you swing so slow, in which the movement of the forest is captured. Forest, why do you swing so low, with your branches bending so? There's no rain and no wind blow. And in mythological, the old woods love to and greet them to tall Titanians and the old wolves in the eternal fields. Where the woods are received human attributes, they love and greet each other. Pictorially, these personifications are rendered in the position of the tree, which seems to move with the wind. Eminescu evokes in his lyric the movements of the plant, shaking, beating, slowing, trembling, rustling, just like Friedrich, who in their paintings captured trees' roots, branches coming out of the tree area, trunks who bends down. Both poetry and painter resort to different moods, to expression to convey what they perceive in nature. While the painter expresses to the image, the poet does it through a suggestive language. There is a close connection between the two because the sources of inspiration are the same, the world around us. Both poetry and painting depict landscape from nature in different situations and moments, day, night, summer, winter, terrestrial, aquatic, still life, living nature. Both express a feeling, happiness, sadness. The similarity between Eminescu's poetry and the painting of the time is due to the concept developed by Romanticists, which allowed the creation of a European community that had the same principles and the same way of perceiving art, offering the possibility to creating an artistic network whose promoters, the poets and painters, formed a union of composition in which they merge their works and implicitly their destinies from different shapes and color tones. In conclusion, a romantic language knows no borders. It is common to all artists of the time, be they painters or writers, has its origin inside the creature and reflects the deepest emotions, feelings, concerns, and dreams of the artist.
Okay, Dr. Roxana, thank you for your presentation. Thank you for your participation here. Persons, anybody have a question for Dr. Roxana from Romania? I think No. I think everyone among us has completed their presentations and our session was over. Dear participants, thanks for your participation. Your certificate will send today evening in your emails. Please check your emails. Deadline for submission of full text is December 15, and the Congress book will be published in December 28. Thank you for your participation. Thank you for your contribution, dear guests, dear participants. Have a good evening from Philippines. Thank you for your participation. Have a healthy, nice day. See you again and another events, another academic events. Thank you very much. Goodbye.
Thank you very much. I have a question. I noticed that from the program it's missing my first name. I have to write you an email with all my name for the certificate.
Okay, please send for us email in our email address, okay? We will send you a new certificate for you. Okay.
Thank you very much.
Thank you too. Thank you too. Goodbye, dear.
Goodbye.
Goodbye.